Excellent. Hi, everybody. My name's Robyn. I am one of the assistant librarians in Liaison and Academic Services at Newcastle University Library. I say liaison, it's a bit like Prince, formerly known as. We've just changed our name to Academic Engagement, but obviously the slides are representing the old name, so we're now Academic Engagement. Okay. Today, I'm going to take the idea of the conference theme of openness and hopefully have quite an open discussion with you all about a recent service change we had at Newcastle University Library, which I'll go into a little bit more detail about. But just to start with, I don't know about you, but this morning I didn't feel as fresh as I hoped I would. Not just because of the football excitement, obviously, but my Premier Inn room was 29 degrees with no aircon last night, so I didn't sleep a wink. So what I thought would be a good idea in advance, and I seem to know that would be needed, is just to give us a brief moment of reflection. So I don't know if you managed to have to run for the train this morning, you got up extra early to get here. Maybe, I don't know, you've had a stressful morning. Let's just take a moment to breathe in and think about a bit of reflection, because we love that as librarians. Okay, so while I'm talking today's talk, I want you to think about a few different questions that I've got in mind. So firstly, are you planning any major changes to your service offer in the coming 12 months? Is anything coming to your mind right now that you think it might be coming up? You may not know that it's a major change, maybe it's a minor change, that's fine. Is there something on the horizon that you're starting to think about as a team, as an individual? How are you planning on engaging with your key stakeholders as part of that major service change? Have you thought about who you need to talk to, when, and why? How are you planning on maintaining resilience in yourself and colleagues? As we know, a lot of people love change. A lot of people find change quite daunting. Is there something you can think about now as you're going through this process of planning the change that may help you think about how you're going to support your colleagues through this and support yourself through this as well? And what can we gain from the change? And when I was practicing this talk for my wife the other day, she was like, that sounds really negative, like change isn't a good thing. But I do mean it in the sense of what can be gained through the process of change. So what opportunities might present themselves as part of this change that you're undergoing? So I'm going to say, is there any Gen Z in the room? Yeah, sorry, I'm really sorry, okay? I've been told this is really cringe and I'm just sorry about it. I can't help it, like, it's just the way I am. So I'm a millennial, I grew up with Harry Potter. I love the art, not the artist, we'll leave it at that. So we haven't got time to unpack that today. But what came to my mind throughout this process of change was this constant thought about the quote I used at the start, which is, I open at the close there. You probably saw that. And that's a quote from Harry Potter, okay? So basically, very long story short, Dumbledore dies, spoiler, and he leaves Harry, the snitch that he caught in his first game at Hogwarts. Now, Harry isn't the brightest in the Harry Potter books. I think that's the point of the Harry Potter books. He doesn't always work things out straight away. He doesn't know why he's been given the snitch. He can't quite get a grasp on it. Anyway, long story short, he realises that he swallowed it on his first game at Hogwarts. He then puts it to his mouth and it presents the phrase, I open at the close. The point being that Harry needs to accept he needs to die to defeat Voldemort. He's a Horcrux as part of this. So again, spoiler alert. So when he does do this, he's given the resurrection stone. You can see the ghosts of his parents, etc. Very sad, very sad. But the point being that at some point, we all need to accept change is coming. It is happening. And we need to accept the closure of things. So it's a bit of a juxtaposition I'm presenting today, which is basically, how do you maintain and nourish openness with a customer base, with stakeholders, with the closure of a service and the resistance that comes with that? And what I'm talking about, if you hadn't heard, is the closure of our law library, okay? So Newcastle University Libraries did comprise of 4 buildings, including a law library, which was situated within the law school. If anybody's visited Newcastle University, you will see the Philip Robinson Library, which is one of our main libraries on campus. Just over the way there is the law school. So it's situated very close to where we are. And the law library was situated within the law school, and it was affectionately known as the dungeon, as it was in the basement of the law school. The decision was taken to close the law library as part of the library services back in early 2025, and that was implemented in May 2026. So at the time of speaking, the law library is now closed. In preparation for that change, the law library operated on reduced opening hours for the past year. So we stopped opening at weekends, we reduced the hours we were open during the week. And print stock started moving last summer. So we prioritised anything in terms of book stock, we prioritise anything essential. So anything on a reading list, anything loaned in the last 4 years was our priorities. And then in terms of reports and journals, which are important in law, we prioritise anything that wasn't available digitally in a strong digital sense. Why this happened? This was obviously a decision that wasn't mine, it was way above me. But basically, I've summarised it in 3 points. The data that we have in terms of our usage data demonstrated law students prefer to make use of the Philip Robinson library spaces over those law library spaces. The majority of print loans by law students were from Philip Robinson Library, so where we had copies across site of the same title, we were finding they were going to the Phil to loan them and not the law library stock. Consolidation of staff and resources after voluntary severance. Again, I'm sure you've all been there. This has been a very tough few years for us in the academic library sector, in the university sector. We did go through rounds of voluntary severance, and obviously my senior team needed to think quite carefully about where we were placing our resource to matter the most. I put that in bold on the screen, but I don't think I needed to really. You can imagine how this went down, and it was bad. Yeah, very, very unpopular with the law school. The law library was coming up to 50-year-old and had been situated in the same space for that full time. It was basically integrated into that school. They felt it was their space, it was their service, it was one of their USPs. It was very, very important to them. So as you can imagine, it didn't go down well. The way I was thinking about this part of this process is loss aversion theory. Has anyone heard of the loss aversion theory? It's quite an old theory and it's been debunked by several people, but I still like the premise of it. Is that if, for example, you were given a tenner by somebody in 6 months' time, you might not remember that you were given that tenner. It's a nice thing, but it happened and it's gone. If you're like me and you drop a tenner on the street, 3 years later, that will haunt you. That will, every time you think you've got a tenner in your pocket, you're going to be going, yeah, I just need to make sure that's in there, because we remember our losses harder than we remember our gains, okay? And this is exactly what was happening with the law school. They were taking this loss, let's say it was a 50 quid loss, and anything we presented to them was still a loss. They were never going to break even, they were never going to see it as a gain. So my job, as the former arts and humanities librarian until very recently, was to convince them we were going to break even or give them back that tenner, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a mixture of a couple of things we did, and then I'm also going to talk about a couple of things that my thoughts and things. I don't imagine any of this is going to be groundbreaking to you, but it's just more, this is like a therapeutic thing for me. It's kind of telling you exactly how it happened, how it went down. There's people from my library laughing at me right now, seeing we're there. So I'm going to give you it as a therapy sense as well, okay? So the first thing we did was we hired 2 student interns from the law school student base. We hired a stage 3 intern, which is Simi, and she was the outgoing Law Society president, which worked nicely. And we hired Ari, who's in the red, and she was our incoming Law Society president. So we basically used them as our Gen Z PR machines, okay? We hired them, we set up a structure for them. We asked them to basically check in with us on a regular basis. They had up to 100 hours work and they were hired through Newcastle University Jobs on Canvas scheme. Basically, we wanted them to communicate the changes to students and promote the services that we did offer on our behalf. They basically designed some social media. They did induction talks for students on our behalf. They did lecture shout outs for us. They did video content posters, which you can see the one in the middle there is one of the posters they did. They promoted our drop-ins and joined us on drop-ins, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. And they also did some feedback surveys for students. They stood in the foyer of the law school and they also sent out Microsoft Forms to get some feedback on how students were receiving our messaging on this as well. So I'm going to show you, if it works, a couple of the things they did.
Me as a faculty and student who's also your communications intern. I had a lecture today, so I had to work at 8:30, moved to the law school at 1 PM for a quick study session. With my face, did not get any work done, get a grip. Anyway, it's 2 PM and we have the library drop-ins for law. The drop-in was being posted by both the academic skills and users of the scene. They can help you with anything from scholar, referencing, writing style to research, so all your academic needs. Think about him before you want to go to the next one to get updates. We have them on level 2 of the Philip Robinson Library. Today was planning sadly for the internship. This was a filming day with the university social media team. We got a laptop, used a teleprompter. Got scripts and the filming for the library skills and resources canvas course. So this is your site to go complete the modules on there. We moved to level 3 for some additional filming. Filmed a tutorial on how to find a book. That was quite fun. We got to filming. I was so tired, so I went home.
Simi was always so tired. So yeah, Simi did an excellent job there. She did a day in the life format for us on TikTok, which obviously really worked. And then this next video, which I'm going to show you, is a bit more of a scripted thing. So I am going to say we didn't understand half of the stuff they were saying, doing, promoting. We did a quick check to make sure it was all okay, obviously. But we didn't understand it, but that was the point, okay? It wasn't, we weren't meant to understand it. The majority of our student base falls in that younger year group, the 18 to 21 age. We weren't meant to get it, really. So bear that in mind when you're watching this one, because I have to. They did that in one take.
In this is our kitchen. We have a private chef. A lot of you guys have been asking me how much I pay a month in rent. First of all, it's none of your business. Second of all, it's $30,000. How actually needs to get fire education. I wish you told me with the environment.
So yeah, so basically, obviously, we couldn't produce that. They needed to do that. We couldn't put that out. They needed to, and it went down really well on our socials. Obviously, it was really funny. They were using sort of viral voiceovers there to kind of demonstrate the features of the library in a tongue-in-cheek way, and that worked really, really well. More generally, in terms of student engagement, then outside of that intern project, we came up with a few different things we wanted to do. And the first one was set up specific drop-in events for law students. We held 6 across the academic year. They were in conjunction with the academic skills team, and we have wellbeing advisors within each school at Newcastle University. So we had a specific law wellbeing advisor, and we invited her along. We looked at the data from Ref Analytics to check when the law library would have been busy, when were those queries actually coming in, and map that against assessment deadlines. That was 20 minutes left. I've got a talk, haven't I?
I have it down as 15. Carry on.
I'll speed up, okay? Sorry, I thought I was a talk, so I've planned for 20 minutes. I will speed up. Anyway, so 6 events across the year. We had our academic skills team there, we had our data, we had our assessment deadlines, all informing where we wanted to, and then we could target our communications to specific modules, and it worked. And that was the thing that sometimes, as you know, without free food or a draw, drop-in events don't usually work, but it did this time. We are going to repeat them this year on a smaller scale. The next thing we did was a World Cafe focus group event. So I asked for a little bit of money to hire 20 students for an afternoon to get them in a room. And as we know, when students are upset about something, they're usually going to tell you some other gold little nuggets that will be useful for you. So we basically got them in a room. We set up a World Cafe style event. We had different tables. We moved around the room, and it meant we could ask them things. So for example, with the print resources, I wasn't quite sure if they were even using the reports because they're reference only. How are they using them? When are they using them? Why would they be using them? So it was those kind of questions we could unpick with them. Why might they use e-resources in comparison to this? And it worked really well. It also gave them that platform again to voice their upset, and it really helped with that. Staff student committees, we attended by standard for all our subjects. We had 3 this year for law, and we had a regular agenda item. And because these are student reps, they feel quite comfortable speaking on behalf of the cohort. It's a great environment to get their thoughts and feelings across as well. And then the next thing we did was we do have embedded teaching. We teach students how to use Westlaw, Lexis, we teach them Oscola. So we use those opportunities to tailor our messaging as part of the embedded teaching and make sure we were repeating those key messages and data to them. So the next one, I wasn't going to focus with the academics on what I did, but more about what I learned, because we all know everybody's academic departments are different. It's a very varied thing. And again, I hope this doesn't sound like I'm teaching you how to suck eggs. It's just sort of some thoughts and opinions that I kind of had out of it. So the first thing is timing is everything, okay? Basically what I was doing was mapping ahead to see when the pinch points were in the academic year. We all do that to figure out when we can communicate messages to people, but this was crucial as part of this project. I would often ask the professional services team if there was anything coming up. That might be a bit of a problem if I was to communicate the same week. I didn't one week, and I put out a message, and it was the same week the law school were hiring 3 new people. So basically, I got a polite message from one of them saying, we don't need a PA. And I was like, yeah, no, that's fair enough. Okay. So that message fell flat. So my advice to you would be to plan ahead, think about the different time scales you might want to use, even think about, okay, they might not have had a check-in for 3 weeks then. Can we plan something in to make sure they understand that? You might need to flex that a week or two. I've had to do that a couple of times. Just because the message is important to you doesn't mean it's going to be important to them at that time. So hold it for a couple of weeks. Focus on your champions. Because the law school had had the law library for a very long time, the staff that had been there for a long time were very attached to it, very emotionally invested in it. So the way I found forward was focusing on the people who hadn't actually been in post that long, were the newest academic staff, and I used them as my champions. And that kind of leads into the next point about opportunities for meaningful involvement. So basically, we all know if you sit people in a room and say, just sound off, they're going to be like, yeah, that's not why I'm here. I want to know what's going to happen. I want to know how I'm inputting, and I want to know what's going to happen as a result of what I'm inputting. Yeah. So basically what I did, for example, is I all the print stock, the book stock that was going to be staying in the law library, eventually moved into our research reserve. That was not going to be used very much. I got them in the space, my champions. I got them looking at that print stock, and I said, you think something needs withdrawn? Put it on that trolley. You think something slipped through the gaps for the essential? Put it on that trolley, and we'll look at it together. And once a few of the champions had done that, some of the more tentative ones were coming out of the woodwork to say, actually, that sounds really good. I'd like to do that. And it gave them that opportunity of something where your hands on in the room. You're not exactly just sitting looking at each other while they're upset. It gives them something to do while they're doing it. And then comms channels. So I went to various different staff meetings and stood in, basically like I am in front of all of you, to tell them the library is closing. I was in different kinds of one-on-one meetings, and I was in emails. So obviously you need to think about exactly what spaces you're going to be in and exactly what communications you want to use at the time. Spend some time mapping out when these meetings are coming up, what you might want to say and how you might want to say it is my advice. Okay, overall lessons learned then. Top one, anger drives opinions. An angry person will tell you why they're angry, and that's the main thing you need to come home with. Is it pleasant? No, it's not. But the valuable opinions I got from these conversations have meant our service provision moving forward is much more open. It is much more driven by what they want. Yeah. So for example, I had an academic who was quite distressed at me, very upset, and one of the more vocal ones, and she said, and what am I going to do about the loose leaves? And I said, sorry, what are you doing with the loose leaves? Because if anybody knows law resources, that was a surprise to me to hear anyone was using the loose leaves. And she said, well, I take the students in and I show them every year. We go for a tour down the law library. So what am I going to do now? And I said, well, if you talk to me about it, we'll put them in the right space. So I moved them into a good space in 24/7 library, right next to some lovely booths we've had made. And she was like, oh, that's really nice. Actually, that works. And it's not part of our reading list. She wasn't going to mention it, but it's these kind of things where you can kind of untangle it and say, okay, you're angry. There's probably something in there I can do for you. Focus on your key messages and data. Again, when you're standing in front of a room of very distressed, angry people, keep going back to your key messages. Make sure you've got those in front of you, but also for all of your staff in the library. So our customer services team were on the front desk when law academics were coming in and dropping books off, but then also asking questions. All your team need to be able to have a line, if you like, of how to respond to these queries. So I did attend one of the customer services meetings just to make sure everyone felt comfortable knowing what they needed to say, but also when to pass it to the faculty librarian to deal with. And take care of yourself and your team. I don't think I did this particularly well. I think this is something that I wish I'd done better. I would have, if in hindsight 2020, I would have set up some time where we talked about nothing to do with law, and we just checked in with each other and we did something completely different. And then I would have set up times where we actually did sit in the room and we did talk about the problems in law, not looking for solutions, but just making sure that we were all on the same page and well-being was the priority in that space. So that's one thing that I learned from that change. So rounding off back to the snitch then. I hope that's kind of give you an idea of how we dealt with the law library closure at Newcastle. Things right now are relatively peaceful. The law school have assimilated their space back, and they have put in a pool table and a darts board. We have had to go on the pool table as well. We snuck in before it closed. Students love it, so that's all fine. Just going back to your reflections at the start then, hopefully you might have been able to think about things that are coming up that might fit in with what I'm kind of saying to you today. What could open for yourselves at the close is the point that I've kind of gone with. And I hope you can kind of see how a closure of a service can bring through those engagement opportunities that are actually quite useful, that will foster openness and relationships moving forward. Okay, thank you.